Hey there, everybody. I just want to welcome all of our listeners to the Gildre Spotlight podcast, episode 1. This is just going to be a quick solo cast on what exactly Spotlight, this podcast, is, what exactly Gildre is, and I'll give a quick introduction and background of myself. My name is Taiga. I was originally born in Japan. I grew up in Missoula, Montana. That is where I'm currently based. I actually just moved back to Missoula, Montana a couple weeks ago. A little bit of an introduction and background of my family. I come from a family of entrepreneurs. I grew up and had the wonderful opportunity of going back and forth between Japan and the United States. My family had an online English language learning software and platform that they would provide to Japanese students in schools. And then additionally, we had summer programs where we would invite Japanese high school and university students to come and enjoy and understand American culture and American life in Montana. And so I had the wonderful opportunity to understand Japanese culture, understand how to run a business as well, specifically a software business and also a people business. Um, you know, having 30 to 40 Japanese students every single year come 2 to 3 weeks, having to manage the program was a fantastic opportunity. Then also, again, my family's online language learning, English language learning software gave me a great background on business development and entrepreneurship. I've been interested in, startups, the business world ever since I was, in high school. The first startup weekend I actually competed in was when I was a sophomore in high school. Or no, excuse me. Yep, no, it was, when I was a sophomore in high school. It was back in 2013, I want to say. And it was a startup weekend in Missoula. And it was just a bunch of my buddies and me. And we ended up actually having a robot called Chizo, which is an amiable robot that goes around events and takes photos of people. We ended up getting third place as a group of high school students, and ever since that moment, entrepreneurship sparked my interest even more. Just because I know from that point, I knew how impactful being a founder, being an entrepreneur is, and how they can change the world around them. So that's just a quick background of me. Kind of a high-level overview. I went to the University of Redlands. I double majored in environmental studies and business, and I minored in spatial analytics. I really wanted to get involved in, something that will help out the environment, which is, I think, a cliche nowadays. But again, I think growing up partially in Japan and understanding Japanese society, I mean, in Japan, they have 3 different garbage bags. They have one for combustibles, one for plastics, and one for like cans. And so I always wanted to get involved in something that will help others, that'll make the world a sustainable place. After I graduated college, I started working at a startup in Seattle, which is essentially a SaaS startup. I ended up leading the company in sales the first quarter I joined. And actually, kind of to preface it, this startup, it's called JungleWorks. Their legal entity, it's called Click Labs. They started an office in Seattle, and this could be a whole entire podcast in itself. They started an office in Seattle, and they essentially wanted to hire American sales folks to sell. They had about 7 or 8 different SaaS products, from an online marketplace builder called Yellow to a management and logistics software for on-demand services called Toucan. Yeah, so again, I led that company for joining sales. They sent me to India for about 2-3 weeks. That was a fantastic opportunity itself. Fell in love with how hardworking folks over in India are. The culture, I think, when I was there, I was like, wow, the future, everyone was using their phones to pay for every little thing. Even like you could purchase one individual cigarette with your phone, which was interesting. But again, I digress. After JungleWorks, I ended up working for a fintech company called Doxo in Seattle for about a year. Gave me a wonderful opportunity to essentially help build out a sales team. I helped train a couple interns, and as well as worked with some of the C-suite executives. So from a young age, I was always working with folks in the C-suite. At that time, I was ambitious, and actually one of my senior project in college was a business plan, and I actually ended up getting, I ended up placing in a business plan competition the month that I graduated. It was April of 2019, for a business called Kudos, which is essentially a two-way marketplace where, one, I'll actually quickly explain. It's an app that incentivizes a user to be more sustainable. The user, also a third-party API extension where it tracks the user's shopping habits. And so the more sustainable products that the user purchases, essentially they get Kudos, and they can use those Kudos to purchase on the Kudos marketplace sustainable products and services. And essentially Kudos will get about 5% commission for bringing more traffic to those sustainable products and services. So that was the basic model. It ended up getting some funding, got a little bit ambitious. This was back in 2020, kind of peak pandemic. And the most difficult part was honestly customer acquisition and getting users to use the product itself. So huge learning lesson. And at that time, Startup Accelerator is reaching out to me to apply. I ended up not applying, but then they asked me if I'd like to join their team to help startups. And so I essentially became a venture associate. And that's how I got more deeper into the startup ecosystem. So worked on Accelerator for about 2 years. And then that's what brought us to Gildre. Essentially, I'll explain what Gildre is, and I can kind of go into the story at a deeper level some other time. But just a high-level overview, Gildre is an international entrepreneurial ecosystem for innovators, founders, mentors, and executives. Our two core mission principles revolve around community for all and meaningful connections. Gildre empowers individuals at any stage of their professional careers to get to that next level. And additionally, we want to give folks in those underserved startup communities access to that Silicon Valley-esque environment. We're focusing on places actually where I'm based right now, Missoula, Montana, the Mountain West, Midwest regions, as well as Japan. I think Tokyo is a very underserved startup community. There's a lot of great minds in Tokyo, but there's no venture capital money. And yeah, ultimately we want to give everybody around the world, innovators, creators, founders, executives, that opportunity to mentors. And so we're community for all. And what Spotlight is our dedicated podcast to highlighting members in the community. And this could be something, a formal conversation that talks about, the specifics and nuances on how to build out a sales team, for example, or how to build a marketing campaign, to a casual conversation talking about, amazing personal life experiences, that our listeners can ultimately learn from. So Spotlight is to spotlight and highlight members in our community. And we hope that, you can be spotlighted in our podcast at some point as well. So with that being said, I want to thank all of our listeners. Please, please, please be on the lookout for the next Spotlight podcast. And I look forward to talking with you guys soon. Cheers, everybody.